Hi, and welcome to Catching Up with Katy. I'm Katy O'Connor-Ives, your state senator, and I'm very excited about today's show. And I have two very excellent guests with me today, one of which is the Reverend Frank Clarkson from the Universalist Unitarian Church of Haverhill, in addition to Kalister Green-Byrd, Haverhill resident and member of the Calvary Baptist Church. And I think that today's show is very timely because we're approaching the celebration of the birth of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. this upcoming 18th of January. And I think there's a lot of exciting things to talk about, including Haverhill's history, as well as upcoming events. So with that introduction, I'm so appreciative that you could both join me here today for the show. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And I'll have to say, I get invited to a lot of events in my capacity as the state senator. And right off the bat, one of my favorite events is the annual breakfast. And I didn't know I'd feel that way until I attended and I participated. But for me, what makes it so special is the community building that happens at that event. And I think it's historical. I love my history. And it's a celebration of not only the past, but what's possible for the future. So I think it would be really helpful for folks to fully appreciate the unique relationship between your two congregations and all of the history that led up to this special breakfast event. So thank you. In your opinion, Kalister, how can you best describe for us really the specific history that was the impetus behind the breakfast?
The start of the breakfast came about while we were using the UU Church after the fire at Calvary Baptist Church. In 1977, in November, there was a fire at Calvary Baptist Church, and part of the sanctuary was destroyed, and we had no place to worship. And at that time, the UU Church, Reverend Janet Byron, came to the fire at the time. We were standing out there, the members in the street, looking at the building, our building being burned, and wondering what were we going to do for a church and where would we worship. And at that time, she offered to have us to use the facilities at the Universal Unitarian Church, which I thought was very generous of them. And also, I thought it would help us because we would not have to leave the area. We stayed in the neighborhood. It was just a matter of going across the street. And during that time, the trustees and the board at UU Church got together and they agreed with her. And her husband at that time was the minister of the church. And then they met with the trustees and the members of our church. And that was the beginning of us joining them.
And what I heard about that was that the UU congregation moved their worship a little bit sooner, and then Calvary would come and worship afterwards. And maybe there was a coffee hour in between? Is that right?
That is correct. And that was really exciting. Some of us came to the service early, and we got to worship with the UU congregation, and that was very helpful to us when they changed their service time, and it was a break in between where they had the coffee hour. So we would come and worship with them, have the coffee hour, and then have our service. And it wasn't just worshiping; they gave us full recognition in terms of the church and being able to use the church as if it was our own. We still were able to have weekly prayer service, choir rehearsal, meetings, whatever was needed as if we were in our own building. And the unique thing about this was that the next day, the custodian over at the UU Church, Ben Falls, the late Ben Falls, helped us move our hymn books and different things that we were able to salvage from the fire over into UU Church. So not only were we using their facility, but they wanted us to feel at home, and we were able to move some of our things from the church over there.
It seems to me it's one of those occasions where a tragedy actually has unanticipated benefits, you know, the silver lining that goes with the cloud. Reverend Van Bowering, who was the minister, he died not long after that, and his wife Janet became the new minister, and she just died a year and a half ago, and she told me stories about this at times, and one of my favorites was that the two congregations developed this relationship that when your sanctuary and building was all repaired, from what I heard, there was a certain sense of sadness about the congregations going their separate ways, but there was a big service, a joint service, I think, that started out in the UU church, and then there was a procession I heard out the front door of the UU church, out towards Canosa Avenue, and then around the building and across Ashland Street, and then up into Calvary's church on Ashland Street, and then the service ended in Calvary's refurbished sanctuary. Is that right?
That is correct. That is correct. We spent actually 5 years there. And a lot happened during those 5 years. And I've been told by some of the members of the UU church, by them opening their doors to us and having us to use their facilities and getting to know, it helped them to reach out into the larger community. They began to have other programs at the UU church. There was a lot of space there. There was a large church, and they felt, gee, we had helped Calvary. Let's see what we can do for the larger community. And so they began to have other services to help the homeless. I remember people would, they provided food and overnight accommodation for the people that didn't have places to sleep and things like that. So a lot happened during that time. And while we were there, that was when we would continue our regular type of service and celebration, and the Martin Luther King celebration was one of the events that we, as an African American church, celebrated and honored, and we joined with that, and so that was the beginning of the breakfast. But it was a long relationship that we have with them, not just through the service and being there, but we became connected.
One thing that I tell my colleagues from other parts of the state or other parts of New England that I think people in the church that I serve feel this way too. I've felt so blessed. I'm in my 8th year, so I'm a short timer compared to some of you all, but and I think you picked up on this at the breakfast too, the spirit that's there, but I felt so blessed by the relationship between our two congregations. Calvary's former pastor, Reverend Dr. Gregory Thomas, who died just last spring, he invited me to preach one year at one of your celebration services in early December, I believe. And that was a great honor for me. And then I got invited to be one of the preachers at his memorial service. But the friendship between our congregations, even though there may be a little bit of theological overlap, but we're different congregations, not just in primarily racial makeup, but we're different traditions, and but we found things that, but those things don't keep us apart.
I think one of the things that I personally felt very strong about the openness and the reaching out that the UU Church did towards us. And I had said, we're talking about showing love and Christianity. They did it. They opened the doors. There was some church who were the same denominations that we are that did not offer to help us in the way that the Universal Unitarian Church did. And not only did we just use their facilities, they helped us in the rebuilding of the church. There's a national newsletter at that time that went to other UU churches all across the country. There was articles put in those newsletters about Calvary and what had happened. And when we would have fundraising, it was amazing at the amount of donations that came in to help us as a result of what the UU Church had done in terms of spreading the word and about the relationship that they had developed with Calvary Baptist Church. And that is something that's very dear to me. I developed personal relationships with the members of the UU Church over the years. I am one of the few members at Calvary that can remember that. I was there the night of the fire.
Wow.
But it has been a long, long relationship. It was just joining together to helping people. It didn't make any difference what denomination we were, what color, none of that. We were in need, we were human beings, and they reached out, and that from the heart. And that was very, very touching to me, and something that I will always remember. I mean, I still have friendships and relationships with members, and I'm getting to know some of the new members that are there now as a result of us having the breakfast and joining together on that. So it wasn't just worshiping there that we were going in. We felt at home. They even gave our trustees keys to their church.
Well, you got to have a key if you're going to get in the door.
But what I mean by that,
Yeah,
we had meetings and different
Right.
groupings and different things, and we could go. One of the things we did, there was a group from Calvary, the officers and the members in UU Church. They set up schedules so that we would be able to use it and not, interfere have conflict in terms of meetings thing, because as a Baptist church, we have a lot of meetings, a lot of things going on, and we were able to continue that. And I think that's what helped us and made us stronger in terms of being able to just stay where we were and continue until the church was rebuilt.
What's amazing to me is the ripple effect that certain positive actions can have, and how more and more lives can be affected, because you're saying, Kalister, that there are people that were originally there, but then there are still new friendships that are forming with the new members of both congregations and the event. And I wanted to mention that in preparation for my speaking at this most recent breakfast, I did a little research, because it's a very important historical event that we're recognizing. Yeah. And in that process, I stumbled upon the fact that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had spoken to and addressed the Massachusetts legislature exactly 50 years ago from 2015. So I read that, I was blown away, I didn't know about it. And when I spoke to the attendees of the breakfast, I said, I want to work toward making that moment recognized as close to 50 years from the date as possible. And again, I wouldn't have realized that if I hadn't attended your breakfast. And it was an amazing thing, because from that, we were able to organize it so that the entire legislature in Massachusetts did in fact convene for a joint session, fairly close to 50 years to the date. And members of the Black and Latino caucus read the entire speech that was spoken on that very day. And we, as guests, were all captivated as we listened to that, every bit as relevant today as it was back then. And through the media and through the attendees, a whole new generation of people recognized that that was an important moment that happened in that very place, and that there's plenty of work left to do. So I mention that because I think that the fact that this tradition carries on is a thing that really changes lives, and it's an important thing to have happen. And fortunately, we have another breakfast coming up soon. And if you could describe really the program of events at that breakfast, and really what makes it such a positive experience.
I think every year it can be a little bit different, but what I love about it is that it's not too much speechifying. There's a little bit of talking, but there's always music. There's always participation from our children and youth from both churches. Some of them, some years they offer music. But there's also a lot of just connecting. One thing that I know people in our congregation love to do is get together over a meal. And I think that's true about your church too.
Yeah,
And there's something about
always
sitting down
food.
and, as they say, breaking bread together.
That's right.
And so there are a whole bunch of little connections that happen around those tables that nobody sees what those connections are, but those are beautiful and holy connections to my mind.
I remember when we first started, after we had gone back into the building, our building, we tried to hold it in Calvary, but it grew. We could not hold it. We did, it just was not enough room. So the decision was made that we would continue to have it at the UU Church with both churches working together. They develop a committee from both churches, and they plan it and they work it together. And I think what is important about it is that not only just breaking bread together, but to meet new people, to talk to them, to actually get to know them, for them to see you and understand how this came about. And my hope and prayer is that it will continue into the future generation. I think it is something that's very important. It shows what people can do when they come together. And we had on one accord and one mind, and can make a difference in a community and in the world. You know, that if they understand that if we were able to do this in Haverhill, these young people, when they go out, they can take that. I think they are learning things that they can, life skills, and about dealing with people and about helping people, and they can just help make the world a better place. And that's part of Dr. King's dream, for that to happen. And I think we can't allow that to go by and just to die. We have to continue because we have younger generations that's coming up in our church. You have, and so if these young people can understand how important and value that is, they can move it on.
You know, just an image that came to mind as you were saying that, Kalister, is there's two young men in our church who play violin and cello. And there's a young man from Calvary, he's in college now, who also plays
Evan Mott.
cello.
Yes.
And this is Connor and Aiden Wirtz, and they met through the Merrimack Valley String Orchestra, which rehearses at our church, and they got to be friends. And so one year they came to the committee and said, we'd like to offer some music. And then they did that for several years, and then they played a piece at Reverend Thomas's funeral service. And that friendship happened because of the open doors between our two congregations, and it's really beautiful to witness.
And that's continued. We have another young man that is part of that group from our church that goes over, and they feel comfortable doing that.
That's right.
And I know my grandchildren, I think one day you took them through the church. They were asking questions because the UU church was quite different than what they had seen. And I think that was great that you took the time to take them through that and explain to them, and they really enjoyed that. And that's the kind of thing that we have to do. We have to pass the baton on to the next generation and let them take it, and they will go on. But it's not just passing on the value in it, the purpose in it.
Right.
One of the things, and oftentimes at the breakfast we talk about, well, we really need to do things more often. I pretty regularly have conversations. Sometimes I see some of your deacons doing things during the week, and we end up having conversations standing out in the parking lot, more so when the weather's warm than when it's cold. But one of the things that's on my mind, particularly these days, as there's so much distrust and oftentimes hateful rhetoric around difference in our country, that I think the way we start to do work together with folks is by building on the relationships we already have. And we have these relationships, so I'm really grateful for those. But one of the things I'm struck by is we have a lot to learn from you all, because particularly for me as a white, I said this in church last Sunday, as a white male, heterosexual, middle class, middle age for now, I have a certain privileged view of the world, and I need other folks to tell me what it's like from where you stand, and that's something that it's not your job to educate me, but I'm grateful for the relationship and for the.
And I think it came to mind when you were talking about just people saying hello. The way the relationship with UU started with Calvary was that way. Mr. Walter Medler Sr., who was a trustee at Calvary, would often be over there working, and as you say, some of the deacons, they would see the members of the congregation and the pastor and different people coming in and wave and say hi, and and just got
Right.
like that, just
friendly.
got friendly to each other,
Yeah.
just by saying hello.
Right.
And one of the things that happened prior to the breakfast was not the first relationship that we had with the UU Church. It started by saying hello, hi, how are you? And that was the playground where the two churches built the playground on Ashland Street. At one time, Ashland Street had a lot of families that lived there, and mostly people of color, African-American families, and there was not a playground there. And so on Sunday after church or before church, the children would be playing in the street. They would see the children going into the UU Church. They would join with them and play. And so one of the trustees, from Calvary Baptist Church said, we need to do something with the land that we have beside the church. But it wasn't large enough, our little plot. We had two plots. One belonged to the UU and one belonged to Calvary. So as a result of that, they talked about, why don't we build a community playground on Ashland Street for children within the community and the surrounding areas. And that's how that started. The first relationship was a playground.
Okay.
That was there where we have the parking lot. And it was the night of the fire that some kids from the community that was playing in the playground that set the church, on fire. And the other thing that the relationship, at one time there was a company that wanted to put a restaurant where Kentucky Fried Chicken is now in Monument Square, and it was called Sambo. Well, we were very offended as African-American church that close. We were offended by the negative, we know Sambo, and myself, I really understand what that is because I was born and raised in the South. Right. But they were petitioning the city to put a restaurant there. Well, we were a small congregation, and we were very much opposed to it, and some of the members in the church belonged to the NAACP. But we said, why don't we talk to the members of the Universal Church and the ministers over there? And we did. And we told them how we felt about it. They came and supported us when we went to the city council in opposition of putting that restaurant there. And so it did not go there.
And that's what's so amazing. I think the most impressive and commendable thing about the breakfast is that it's a synthesis of history, because you have to know your history in order to not repeat the same mistakes again and again.
It's true.
And then it's about communicating, because even though we have social media and we're inundated by communication, is it quality socializing and quality relationship building, which takes effort and time?
That's right.
And that happens at this event.
Yeah.
And lastly, I think that event always leaves me newly empowered. You feel like you can actually make a difference. When things feel overwhelming and things seem out of our control and snowballing, you realize it's person to person in the end.
It is.
Yeah.
And hopefully if we do our jobs in terms of the people that we interact with,
That's true.
and are only treating them, the rule is so crystal clear as we want to be treated, then that's fine, and that's going to make a difference. So that's what's so great, and that cold weather on those early mornings, to be able to walk away with that hopefulness and to have that purpose is really special. And I thank you for your involvement in that and how welcoming you've been.
I think you mentioned about the cold weather, and we've had some rough January days at the breakfast. People always come out. It has never been that, few people showed up. they always come out no matter what the weather is. That's how important it is to the two churches, and feel that it is something that they want to continue.
Exactly.
You know, I was, a piece of his writing that I really appreciate is Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail. And I was looking at that in the last couple of days, and I was struck by a passage that he was talking about the people that he sometimes felt like the white moderates who sat back and didn't do anything were actually more discouraging than the racists who opposed them more directly. And he said, we will have to repent in this generation, not just for the hateful actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. And what I come away from our breakfast and from the weekend with is the reminder of how important it is for us to use the voices that we have.
That's true.
And use the hands that we have while we're
That's
here.
right.
And so I'm really grateful for our relationship, because it reminds us that we do have, as you said, that opportunity to do things and create that positive ripple effect
Exactly.
in our community.
Complacency can be a very dangerous thing.
Right,
Okay.
right.
And it's always important to speak and act when we're called to do so, I think.
sir.
So I really want to thank you. The time has flown by, but I think that that's a sign of quality conversation and a lot to talk about. And more likely than not, I'm going to ask you to come back, because I don't feel like we finished our conversation.
Right.
But I really do appreciate all of the good memories and all of the conversation about things that require a lot of our attention and work nowadays, in terms of treating each other with respect and kindness and understanding. So I thank you, and I know that you'll be back soon to talk more about this amazing relationship that both congregations
We would
have.
love that, and we also want to thank you, because we appreciate you showing up for the breakfast. It's a great opportunity for elected officials like you to show up and be present and meet people and say a few words. So we're grateful for your presence there.
I thank you for having us here, and I thank you for coming to the breakfast. And I think by you coming to the breakfast, when you go out, you spread the word too. So you're taking and passing it on, what is going on in your community. And when you meet your colleagues or other people from other parts of the state, you can help them to understand what is going on here and how successful it has been. And so you have a role in this too.
Thank you. It's my honor to have it.
Okay.
And on that note, that concludes our second episode of Catching Up with Katy. I thank you again for taking the time to be a part of this program, and I look forward to seeing you again on another episode.